Hello, welcome to the Wonder and Whimsy Podcast. I'm Kim Hamilton, and this is.
Hey, I'm Logan Daniels. What's up?
And today we are going to be discussing the philosophy of freedom. We're going to be reading some song lyrics and talking about how it relates to various philosophies regarding free will, determinism, things like that. So if you like philosophy and deep conversations, subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. And with that, do you want to start by just kind of giving the viewers a little bit of a backstory?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, by the way, for having me. I really appreciate coming on here and doing this. I think this is such a great idea and a great opportunity for artists to talk about things like philosophy and where we find it all the time in our art forms. My name is Logan Daniels. I am a musician here in Atlanta, Georgia. I play a lot of cover shows as a solo acoustic artist. So I've played a ton of songs, but I'm also a lover of music. I try to think that I have good taste in music from time to time. We're gonna find out today with some of the songs that I picked to talk about. But yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to do this. This is gonna be a lot of fun.
Yes, well, thank you for being here. I'm sure, like, as a musician and an artist, you have all kinds of opinions about philosophical beliefs. So I'm curious to kind of pick your brain about these songs and what they mean to you. So
Well,
the
to tell you the
first
truth,
one,
if I can interject just to start it off with,
yeah.
I think that I like to say that I chose to be a musician. Like I felt the need to choose to be a musician, but I felt a need to be that. I don't think that I actually chose it for myself. So if we we can always start out there.
Okay.
It was predestined to be I was to be a musician anyway. So
Interesting. So you're saying you might have not chosen the path, but the
I
ch
don't
path chose you,
I
perhaps.
don't think I did. I don't think I did. But both of my parents were like hobby musicians. So there was music in my house, and then I had like relatives who were also musicians. And then I come to find out that there's been musicians all throughout both sides of my mother and father side of the family that just never even knew about. So the likelihood of me becoming a musician was high. I have a brother who is also a musician, but he is also a another creative too. He's a graphic designer, and a multi-instrumentalist. So he is way more creative than I am in the sense. I think that he chose to be a creative, but I was destined to just be a musician.
Well, that is related to the various philosophical ideas regarding free will versus determinism. So
Hmm.
if you're saying that you didn't necessarily feel like you had the free will to choose to be a musician, but it was sort of predetermined based on the environment you were born in. So determinists typically believe that we don't have free will, that
Hmm.
everything is caused by something that happened before it.
Hmm.
So that can trace back to the Big Bang, right?
Right. Yes. No, I can understand that the butterfly flaps his wings and before you know it, children are born all over the place.
Yes.
Um,
And oftentimes it feels like we're making conscious, free decisions. It definitely feels that way. However, determinists would argue that many of our thoughts are just the result of chemical compounds that we can't really help, and environmental factors, like what you were saying, being born into a family with certain genetics, with certain aptitudes, with
mhm.
certain being surrounded by talented musicians. How could that not influence you, right?
Right.
But yeah, I think it's really interesting, this question of free will. And
Yeah. There is a there I think that as I if I'm basing my decisions off of my feelings and ultimately I want I want my feelings to always kind of go back to the good thing, right? Whatever choice I make, I want it to have that positive sort of outcome. And when it comes down to things like music and being creative, I choose to pursue those sort of concepts, which makes me a musician in the long run. But there's something inherent about why I enjoy pursuing those kind of things. Even if I didn't create music and become a musician, I could still say that I'm part of like a larger community of people that feel that exact same way. But I am choosing to pursue it because our senses, our five senses, are only so limited, but they're all so very subjective to us. Is that the right term? I always get that mixed up. But yeah, how music makes people feel. I tend to get very emotional for certain songs. There's actually some songs that I picked out that as I was typing them out, I like was actively like bawling up inside. And when it happens to me, I can't stop it. It's a whole thing. And that feeling of the vibrations and stuff has led me to making the decisions that I want to follow it, which puts me in a place where I'm a musician now. Because somewhere along the lines that my body reacted to enjoying music down the
Yeah.
line.
I
So it's
love
a balance. It's a balance
Yeah.
between choosing to continue to pursue it and the free will that I have, but
Yeah.
also knowing that my memory is what keeps me coming back. The memory of being like music is good. Music is doing this to me.
Hmm.
Um, that's where I think the freedom of the choice is. But this is all very narrow in like me becoming a musician. Uh,
Uh, but no, it's a great example of how these questions of free will versus determinism come to play in our lives.
mhm.
Um, so are you saying that you believe that you do have the free will to kind of choose your path, even though it feels like there are a lot of factors that influence your choice? Would you say you think you do have the free will? Like your choices are are yours and not predetermined by science, predetermined by
Oh,
genetics, predetermined by what happened before.
I think that there is a probability, there's like a percentage of what we think will happen and what we think will fall apart when we make these decisions. So, for instance, like I choose music 100 or 90% of the time.
Hmm.
I choose jumping out of airplanes 0% of the time.
Okay.
Okay, so we could just, or maybe 10% of the time. Um, and in recognizing those choices is all based off of the data entry that I have, which is my memory, sight, sound, or just all the senses, and then your memory. And so when each one of those decisions, when I think about making them and the choices that are laid out to me in those moments, yeah, each person is experiencing things differently. So you can't necessarily narrow it down to being like, well, this is the correct way to choose. It's all weighted on what you think is best getting you to who you want to be by the end of the day or at the end, like, if I want to be a songwriter and I only say that I want to be one and not devote 80% of the decisions I make throughout the day revolved around being a good songwriter,
Hmm.
I will not become a songwriter because I won't have the track record. I can apply it to like working out too.
Hmm.
Um, Working out is a very strange one because you're actively walking into a place that you're supposed to fail. So you are making the choice to go to a place to fail because you know that some days you just don't feel like going to the gym, or some days you just it like or maybe now you got a fucked up knee or something that happened to where you just don't like going to the gym. All of a sudden now that wasn't predetermined. You didn't expect to get hurt, but you kind of did because you're going to a place where you know you're going to lift weights and hurt yourself if you do it. So, so I think it's still a balance. You get to choose which path you take, but they're all laid out for you because of the choices that you made.
I see. Okay.
It's a balance.
So I wonder, uh, so basically by definition, determinists believe that everything is predetermined by something that happened before it, and
Hmm.
we don't have any free will. Free will is just an illusion. But libertarian, not in the political sense, but in the philosophical sense, if you're a libertarian, you believe that no, human beings do have free will. We have the ability to choose our own destiny. Now, compatibilists are kind of in the middle.
So that's where I'm sitting, right?
So that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if you might consider yourself, by definition, a compatibilist,
I'm
because
going based off of your recommendation of this because I did not get that far to think that there. I mean, I'm sure that I probably could have been like, oh, you know, I'm a fence sitter, so like in this case, I can find examples of going down either path. So yeah, I would go based off of your definition of that. That's probably what I am. But
yeah,
upon further
compatibilists,
research.
right, right. Compatibilists believe that everything is technically predetermined, scientifically speaking, and but we can still, in this context, in the social application, say that we have free will. So compatibilists just sort of change the definition of free will. So they
Hmm.
look at free will in the social application versus the scientific application. So compatibilists believe that yes, scientifically everything is predetermined, but socially we have free will.
Yeah,
Because,
I would say that maybe it is something that I always go back to in those moments is the fact that this moment in time is new. It
Mhm,
has not happened. So, or it's like happening in this moment. So
mhm.
all of these concepts are still based off of data that we've collected from the past and
Yeah.
our memory.
Yeah.
So that would be, yeah, I would say that it's more about the social aspect of it because we're all experiencing time at the same time away from one another, if that makes sense. Like, I know that myself, and some famous person here in this same city is experiencing 8:30 in the evening at the same time.
Hmm.
But as far as what we're doing with our time and lives, that is all brand new to us every single moment.
Oh, yeah. Well, the way that we measure time is very much a social construct, but
Hmm.
time itself, all that really exists is this moment. You said something interesting that this moment is new. However, quantum mechanic theory might suggest that we actually exist in multiple parallel universes. I bring up quantum mechanics because quantum mechanics suggests that free will is quite possible because of different experiences with something can't really happen unless there's an observer. So quantum mechanics is a great argument for free will, that we do have free will.
Hmm.
But other scientists, if you're not going into the quantum realm, then there is no solid proof that we have free will. However, it
Yeah.
certainly feels like I do. Like when I'm
Mhm.
making a decision, I feel as though I am consciously making the decision, right? I feel like I have the freedom to choose between drinking this tea or not. Like,
Mhm.
I have the choice. I could drink it or
Yeah.
I could not.
Right.
But determinists would argue that no, you don't have control over your choices, even though it feels like you do. Everything is determined by your biology, by your genetics, by your chemical compounds in your brain. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
There is a there the I guess the stopping point for me is what I am interested in understanding as being the reason why I make the choices that I make. I make the choices that I make because I want to be a good person. I want to have a demeanor that is inviting. I want to be talented in certain aspects of my life. I want to continue to grow, and all of those things are so subjective to me
Hmm.
that I have a hard time saying that if it is all based on what's determined, then I should be really freaking good at everything that I do. Because if it was already predetermined for me and this is what I want and how I feel in wanting these sort of things, then why do I have to put in this consistency to these attributes? Because it's all a constant learning, right? It's like if I make a mistake and get into an argument with a stranger about something, and I never see that person again, or I suffer some sort of consequence as that interaction and my inability to follow I guess, the guidelines that of the person that I want to be, then yeah, like I could have seen that it was going to be determined that I was going to get arrested for, getting into an argument and fighting somebody at a bar, because I was drunk. Like I could easily go back and look at all that data, but in those moments, I'm not thinking about being that kind of person. I'm thinking about, whatever. I'm living in the moment. I'm doing this in the moment sort of thing.
Hmm.
So those in the moment decisions are what, in my opinion, is the free will that we have because we know what is the right thing to do. If you can be introspective enough to know that you don't want to be a bad person, you should be introspective enough to know to make the right decision. If you decide to do the wrong thing, you're going to learn how to make the right decision eventually. So that would be that deterministic sort of value where you're doomed to repeat all the mistakes that you've ever made until you correct them in your behavior.
Hmm.
And that is definitely something that is determined because we don't know our behavior like
Hmm.
that. We have to have somebody like who observes us. That's why I think having close friends that you can confide in and be able to express your emotional state without like losing it on each other gives you the freedom to understand that your emotional state and your decision making don't have to be intertwined with one another. You can make that's why they say the more calm you are, the better decisions that you make.
Hmm.
Even if you're like super excited, or happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I love thinking about how much our emotions and logic can play into our decision making because oftentimes our emotions and our logic are actually at war. You
Yeah.
know, like I
Yeah.
might feel like I want to do something, but logically I know that's not the most sensible thing,
Yeah.
right? I think it's nice when our emotions and our logic are aligned.
It is, yeah. I mean, that's a harmonious moment, and usually, if it yields good results, you're like, "Yay, let's do that again," But ultimately, I used to have friends that would tell me that, when I would get upset about things that were seemed trivial and to most circumstances, or maybe even unprofessional, and I would lose my mind over it. um I would get so embarrassed that it would create this negative loop in my mind to where I would just result to be like, oh, well, that's just me as a person. And it wasn't until I was like, no, I went into that situation with a hot head, or or maybe I was, too inebriated at the time to realize that the decision that I was about to make, it's not like I needed to do that. It's
Mhm.
because I was listening to this emotional person in my mind, or just this voice in my mind that said, oh no, pick a fight with that guy. That sounds like a great idea. Or yeah, tell that person off for being, it happens to me all the time in the car. Thank God, thank God nobody can really truly hear what we have to say about one another in the car. Um, but that sort of thing starts to create a negative loop, and that will ultimately determine whether or not I make good and bad decisions, not only for myself, but for the people that I'm close with and truly care about. And it's good to have like I said, it's good to have a safety net for those people that will be like, hey, you made a bad decision, and I'm going to tell you that you made one. Doesn't mean that I hate you. It just means that you messed up there, and I'm at least willing to see you come through on the other side as a good person, to never make that decision again, to do that.
Yeah. Speaking of making what we consider bad decisions versus good decisions, our entire judicial system, our laws are based on the assumption that we do have free will. Because if we don't have free will, how can we hold anyone accountable for their actions? Like, for instance, there was a study done. This professor started having these urges towards pedophilia with one of his students, and he started making advances on one of his students. And what they realized, and then he started reporting these headaches, and they examined his brain. And what they realized is that there was a tumor growing in his brain, which was disrupting the prefrontal cortex. Now, when your prefrontal cortex of your brain isn't working, you don't make the most rational choices. You have a hard time with impulse control. So after they removed the tumor, he no longer felt those pedophile that
Yeah.
like pedophile inside him. He no longer felt those urges. So that raises a lot of interesting questions regarding free will. Can we hold him? Did he have free will when a tumor was developing in his brain? Is it his fault? Like, could he help his actions in that instance? You know,
Well, yeah, yes and no, not in the moment, but I think that yeah, just to even say it, that is a situation that we can look at and create a law around how health insurance and being able to go and be examined on a consistent basis to make sure that we are as healthy as we possibly can be helps with the social construct of being able to have the free will.
yeah.
I think that laws that are in place for people who do commit the crimes that they are doing is based off of something like this in particular, is something that mental health evaluations on a consistent basis with just anybody. I mean, you think about how many people are now going to therapy because it's so easily accessible.
Hmm.
That is in and of itself is probably giving people insight on, like, it's helping the cause essentially. So I believe that punishments could be reduced to lesser sentencing if we were able to help with the healthcare system, so that way when people do make these kinds of they or their lives take these kinds of turns where you don't know when you're going to have a tumor, you don't know if you're going to get some disease. um it makes it so that way, if it is treatable, they don't have to live a life of persecution
Hmm.
and demonization.
Yeah.
They can still be people. I'm a firm believer that we don't need the death penalty. I think
Hmm.
that everybody has the capacity to be rehabilitated. But it does take a lot, it takes a lot more people to work at that than just trying to fix the one person who was the problem in that one moment.
Hmm.
So Go ahead.
would you agree that a person who commits a crime, it's not all their fault, it's society's fault?
Mm-hmm.
Because, for instance, people that are born into poverty, do they actually have as much free will? Do they have
No.
free will? Do
Well,
they?
I think that they find their ways to do it.
Yeah.
Because ultimately what life boils down to is the simplicity that we decide to enjoy, right? Like touching grass or whatever. The people that are in the most amount of poverty or that live in poverty, um, I have relatives that look at people who are like they think that the majority of people who are homeless are choosing to be homeless. I think that there is a portion of people that choose to be homeless or choose to live in poverty, but there were philosophers that touted doing that very thing to see
Hmm.
if you could handle if it ever happened to you.
Yeah.
And so if it came down to like, having systems that were, like I said, were capable of helping one another, who wouldn't go crazy if they were homeless? Who wouldn't go crazy if they lost every family member they ever had or didn't have anybody close to them that they could talk to? Who wouldn't be crazy if you hadn't eaten in 4 days? That there's a level of empathy that I think that we have to have, and having empathy is, in my opinion, a free will choice. Is a choice. Like I think that that's part of free will because not
Interesting.
everybody can understand what empathy is. I have relatives that are like, "Why do you carry a case of water in your car?" So that way, when I run across a homeless person and I don't have anything monetary to give them, I can at least give them a bottle of water because I would want that. There for a little while, I would make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and just hand them out to homeless
Oh.
people. Like just because I would have them in my car and I'd be out driving. So that goes a lot. It's like, why dehumanize somebody that makes mistakes? We all are human. We all make mistakes. That's
Mhm.
part of that. That's part of the determined. I'm gonna fuck that word up every time.
Determinism.
Determinism. Yeah, that's part of the determinism. And then, like I said, it goes back to me thinking that it's a balance. Like you don't know what you're gonna get dealt, but you do have the freedom to choose which one is the best for you, even if all outcomes are shitty.
Hmm.
You can still make a choice about which one is going to be good for you in that moment.
You brought up an interesting point about food and how much like food actually changes the way that we think
Mm-hmm.
and the way that in our decision making skills.
Yeah.
Um, I think I read a study not that long ago about uh, the statistic of crime
Uh-huh.
and that crime is way higher uh, if someone is like hungry
Oh yeah.
kind of thing. Like I don't
Yeah.
remember the exact statistic or anything, but if, food, people often say, "Oh, well, a drug is anything that can alter your state of mind," but food itself alters your state of mind.
Absolutely.
And, the judicial system nowadays, like you can have a psychological evaluation and you can plea temporary insanity if you can prove that you weren't in the right state of mind, the best state of mind, to no fault of your own, you can get away with certain crimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're basically saying, "Ah, I did this. This wasn't my free choice. I couldn't help but make this choice because of the chemicals in my brain at the time. I
Right.
plead temporary insanity." Or, some people, if they have like a mental issue, like a legitimate chemical imbalance in their brain, like if they're, if they have anything like bipolar, if they're sleepwalk, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, like if somebody is a sleepwalker
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and they like commit a crime in their sleep, can you hold them accountable for that? Like,
I I I remember the very first I had gotten in trouble when I was younger and I had to take a DUI class, and there was a young lady in the DUI class who was a pretty upstanding citizen for what she talked about, but she was prescribed Ambien. And
Mm.
she took Ambien one night and took the police on like a 2.5 hour chase up 85 on no tires,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Now, I think that ultimately, when it comes down to our judicial system and the punishment that meets the crime, I don't think that there's enough people in the government to be able to really understand and help without having to think about some sort of bottom line, right? Some sort of monetary way to make sure that all these people get paid so that way this one person who fucked up is, can get off the hook. That's the way it sounds. But
Hmm.
that's not the way it would be if we did have all of these things in place for when people do make mistakes. We understand why they did it and we can make more social under like I once again I believe that if we had our five basic needs met, that people would be less likely to commit the kind of crimes that they commit because they're basing a lot of it seems like people base a lot of their reaction to things like being hungry, being homeless, not having social networks around them, and not having enough drinking water. Uh, all of those factors can be avoided by not monetizing off of the needs of what we need, of the things we need. And that just goes to my leftist thing. But I want to go back to I want that was all of my leftist arc, but I want to go back to what you said about the food. And so this is my first shout out. I want to give a shout out to Saj Guru. Do you know who Saj Guru
I
is?
do,
Oh my
yes.
gosh, sweet. Somebody who knows. I've been telling people about I read Inner Engineering twice, like and through audiobook, but I listened to it twice. And I even signed up for his program. Now, his program is very extensive and it requires a lot of attention. But his some of the things that he talks about when it comes to food is I practice those sort of things when I eat. I eat in silence. I no, so no distractions. I try not to talk. I try not to read anything, nothing on in the background. I've been since the weather has been nice today. I went and had my lunch in the sun. And what he tells you to do is when you take that first bite, the molecular structure of the things going on in your mouth start to react. And if you can recognize those changes when it's happening, you will be more in tune with your body, with yourself. You'll understand what it means to recognize how your body is feeling.
Hmm.
And ever since then, I have been on a journey of reducing my portion size, um, choosing healthier things to eat instead. He is vegan, and he talks about how eating meat is bad, but I'm not there yet. I don't even know if I ever will be. It doesn't matter to me. But that particular thing that he talked about where it's like being more present, that is something that I'm trying to be like more aware of. And if
Yeah.
it means that food is going to get me to that place, then I adopted some of his stuff. So shout out to Saj Guru. He's great. Yeah, I think he's awesome.
Yes, I that's something I actually teach when I'm health coaching
Hmm.
is mindfulness, mindful habits, including mindful eating.
Hmm.
The average working American often is dealing with stress, and if you're eating really fast on your lunch break, for instance, and you're not really fully present, you actually have stress hormones like cortisol
Hmm.
going on. And so when your stress hormones are high, your body is more inclined to store fat. And your stress hormones can change everything.
Yeah.
But when you practice the art of mindful eating and taking your time to bring all your attention, all your awareness to the sensory experience of what you're eating, chewing, taking your time to mindfully chew, swallow, and enjoy the experience,
Yeah.
then you're going to be releasing. all kinds of different hormones that affect your digestion.
Hmm.
So many people nowadays are dealing with digestive issues because they're always eating when they're in fight and flight mode, when their brain is in fight and flight mode.
Yeah.
But if you can activate your parasympathetic nervous system with deep breaths or relaxation techniques, and you're eating when your body is in its parasympathetic nervous system, when it's in its like rest, digestion, then you're actually going to literally digest your food in a healthy way.
I
And
feel like the algorithms have been feeding us the same stuff. You know, like, well,
yeah.
I mean, you make a career out of this. Me, I'm finding people on TikTok that are basically talking about these exact same things, and you know, I've never been diagnosed with anything like ADHD, but I think that I have a a tinge of it that I'll adopt
Hmm.
um some of these concepts, even if I'm not diagnosed particularly, as
Hmm.
long as they're not like harmful. One of the things that Saj Guru talks about to kind of curb appetite in the morning time is taking neem and turmeric, like
Oh yeah.
neem and turmeric pills.
Hmm.
And I do that, and I do it on a consistent basis. And I don't know if I see um the benefits of it because I drink an entire pot of coffee also for breakfast, you know. And you know, I have other sort of eating habits that like if what he's promoting it to be is it really helping me? I can't really say, but it feels healthy. You know, I mean, if every time I take it, maybe it's a placebo effect, and I'm giving him $30 every month. But ultimately, like that is it feels good to research, try something that is going to possibly make me healthy in the long run. I think that was like what I took away from his teachings was like these are things that if you start doing it now, even if it's not perfect right now,
Mhm.
it will eventually get to a place to where you will be so consistent that when you break the habit, it like you just break it that once and you come right back to where you were. You know,
Mhm.
you can go and have now we're moving into a whole new TikTok game that I would be talking about. But I'd like to talk to some about some of these songs if you want to like maybe go through some of these lyrics.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I could talk about like the mind-body connection and like how our thoughts affect us physiologically. I could talk about that stuff all day. But going back to
Maybe another podcast. Maybe I'll come back and do it
yeah.
again.
Going back to free will, so you suggested some really great songs that relate to the philosophy of freedom. The first one is Float On by Modest Mouse. Do you want to read those lyrics? Then we can talk about them.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, the reason I love these lyrics is because they are so circumstantial. Like
Mhm.
it's great. Is a great example of how you choose to look at the cards you've been dealt, right? So if there is this determinism that says, you know, for instance, the first lyric is I backed my car into a cop car the other day. Well, he just drove off. Sometimes life's okay. I ran my mouth off a bit too much. Oh, what did I say? Well, you just laughed it off and it was all okay. We don't know the reaction that we're going to get.
Right.
We, but the reaction that we give will determine or will have a higher probability of yielding the sort of reaction that we want.
Hmm.
So, so in this sense, you got a cop car where if you run into a cop, there's a lot of repercussions. And if you have the kind of attitude toward this cop that is negative or positive, all of a sudden you hit the cop car, negative, positive. What am I about to say? What am I about to do? And all of a sudden he just drives away, and you're like, oh, there's like a relief now.
Hmm.
And in this case, the chorus, we all float on, that relief and feeling is a floating feeling. It's described as a floating feeling. And so I think that in that case, it was determinism.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get the chance to make the choice.
Mm-hmm.
We just had to go with what was going on. The
Yeah.
second half of the line, or the second half of the stanza, I ran my mouth off a bit too much. What did I say? This might imply that he might have been inebriated or maybe just doesn't remember the conversation, but it clearly upset this person due to his opinion, however it might have come across. But the person laughed it off and just said, in this case, c'est la vie. Like, is that once again was not we didn't that was predetermined for us. That was them laughing was not a result of the choice that we made consciously, but something that we don't remember doing, but getting the sort of empathetic response of being like, oh, it's laughed off. It's not that big of a deal. No big deal. Or maybe it was something to where they were like stewing over what they said and
Mm-hmm.
being like, well, what did I say? What did I say? And when you finally confront and be like, hey, did I upset you? And they just laugh it off, you're kind of let go. Another freeing moment. So
Mm-hmm.
that that first line in particular is definitely this duality of it all. Which one which one was my fault? Which one was predetermined, and which one was a part of my thinking? And
Yeah, I see what you mean. It also, I feel like this whole song sort of reflects the balance between accepting what we can't control and exercising autonomy over our reactions. Because
hmm
we can't control how someone's going to react to us, and we
hmm
can't predict that. But we can, or at least it feels like we have control over our reactions.
it goes
Right?
back to what I was saying about there being a percentage of what we think is going to happen.
Yeah.
If I come across as being an asshole, what do I expect to happen? There's a 90% chance that somebody is going to reciprocate that response.
Right.
And but if I go across, but there's like a 50% chance if I go into it with a an open heart, like a try to understanding something calm,
Mm-hmm.
you're about to make your decisions in the moment based off of their reaction toward you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, it definitely goes to like it would be we would have no way of determining what they were going to do,
Mm-hmm.
um, due to the nature of how they've grown up and everything like that. Like the cop in particular. Even like I'm looking through the second lyric, and so they have a fake Jamaican took every last dime with that scam. It was worth it just to learn some sleight of hand. I think that that's a line that is about how you can turn a bad situation into
Yeah.
something good,
Yeah.
clearly. And then of course, bad news comes. Don't worry. Even when it lands, good news will work out its way through all them plans. That just reinforces that last line.
Mm-hmm.
And then we both got fired on exactly the same day. Well, we'll float on. Good news is on the way.
Mm-hmm.
That leaves it up to that line right there is the determinism because he is stating that good news is on the way. It's
Yeah.
only likely to be on the way because life goes up and down.
Yeah.
We know we don't know how it's going to go up and down, but we know it will.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of that song. I think Jewel wrote it. I've been down so long. I know it can't be longer still because I've been
hmm
down so long. The end must be drawing near.
hmm
So it's sort of reflective of this notion of like, okay, well, we just had some bad news that happened. So that means, I mean, eventually we're going to have good news on the way, unless it
hmm
just keeps bad news after bad news is less likely, right?
Right. Well, that kind of also brings into the effect of do we have the ability to see the good? Because
Yeah.
I think that our brains, I know that there are studies where they say it's kind of like if you're shopping for a new car and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden you see that car on the road everywhere. all of a sudden you recognize it. Well, you told your brain to recognize it because you're looking for that sort of car.
Yeah.
So you're already doing that. So in essence, you're saying, I know that good news is out there. I'm just going to wait and recognize when I see good news and then
Yeah.
chase it.
Because you can actually look at bad news as good news. Like, for instance, if you're struggling with something, you don't have to look at it as bad. You can look at it as a learning experience, an opportunity for growth. Just like, okay, the fake Jamaican took every last dime with that scam, but it was a lesson for some sleight of hand. So it's all a matter
Maybe
of,
in a negative way too. Maybe they picked up the trade,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. But it's all a matter of perspective and how you look at it. You can call something bad news just because it's disruptive of the flow.
Hmm.
But just because something disrupts your flow, you can float on the other way. That's kind of how I
Absolutely.
see the song. It's like for instance, I'm working a job and then the company goes under, so we all get laid off. That feels like bad news, but when one door closes, another one opens kind of thing. So it's all a
Absolutely.
matter of how you look at it. So I love
Yeah, I
the
think that that's
song.
that people are definitely not trained to look at things like that. So you were saying, yeah, you want to talk about this next song?
Sure. I was gonna say I really do love this song because this song gives me it's a very like peaceful philosophy, like just to kind of accept everything as is and to know that like, okay, we'll all float on anyway, to not take things too seriously. That's kind of how what I get when I like listen to this song.
Yeah.
Bring it on. Here we are, win or lose, win or lose. Win or lose, I can't say, and we'll all float on. Okay, we'll all float on. Like, we'll get through this. We'll float on anyway,
Yeah,
right?
we still will be a distant memory. There's a reason why we are so interested in our past is because we want to know what it was like for the people that came before us, that created us,
Yeah.
that brought us to this place. Which I think is the reason why I enjoy philosophy so much is because when I was told that I first started getting into stoicism when I started to do the philosophy thing, which is a pretty common thing for a guy in his 30s, single guy in his 30s to be like, yeah, stoicism, let's go. But I did realize when I think it was Adam Holiday that said, these are all just questions that have still not been answered, and they've been asked for thousands of years that they've been
Yeah.
asked. And for us to still not have that answer, I'm not going to solve it. So I won't die on a hill,
Mm.
but I will definitely find examples of almost any sort of other, like any sort of philosophical concept, even if it's against another, like as a devil's advocate, I suppose. So,
Yeah, I think sometimes understanding an opposing viewpoint of something
hmm,
or understanding the other side of your beliefs, it can actually help strengthen your beliefs as well.
yeah.
But with just ignoring the other side, that doesn't help anyone arrive at the truth, because
Hmm.
typically like philosophy just means the love of knowledge, the love of wisdom. Most of us are kind of on a journey to figure out the truth, about reality, why we're here, if there's a reason why we're here, if it's all
Yeah.
just random chaos, meaninglessness.
Yeah. I'll let
So I
somebody
feel
else think
like
about that.
yeah, but I feel like even though we're still asking the same questions ancient philosophers asked, and we haven't arrived at hardcore conclusions that are 100% verified, I think it's still important to ask these questions. One, it's fun to wonder about these things, and I think that it can help us get a little closer to the truth. Even if aren't totally sure about the truth, I think having these conversations, it helps us get just a little closer to the truth.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What's the next song you wanted to I really
I I'm
Free
actually
by
gonna pick one that
Fish.
is probably a little bit out of sorts, but I
Okay.
don't even know how to say the name of this song. But it's Hajimemashite by Umphrey's McGee.
Okay.
And this song, Umphrey's McGee is not a very well-known band, but they're a jam band.
Hmm.
And this song always kind of spoke to me, um, because it's about not knowing. It's about that part of us that's just like you don't know what's going to happen. So it's a very short, like the lyrical content is really short. Songs are
Hmm.
very long because they're a jam band, but lyrically they're very short.
Yeah.
So the lyrics are, I didn't know things were supposed to be this way. I wasn't told of this before. But had I known about this fall for some time, then maybe I could have been or could have known. I once was dropped amongst the crowd, this crowd. Um, the second line is, I didn't know things were supposed to be this way. I wasn't told of this before. It's all right, was all I heard. It'll blow away. So, and then it comes back and it says, when it's faded from my mind, gone without this time, it's fading fast. So basically, it's saying that because we don't know what's going to happen, it is about our choices. It is about our free will to make these choices because once more, we see the complexity. He is only expressing it through a poem, but
Hmm.
you can at least assume that there are layers to the specific thing that he might be talking about.
Yeah.
But because it's put in this broad sense, we already know that we've experienced times where if I had known that my life was going to turn out this way because of this decision, I would have never made that decision.
Yeah.
In the sense of I once was dropped amongst the crowd or this crowd, the crowd is the people that think this way.
Yeah.
That's the crowd. He was just dropped there. And everybody's talking about, oh man, if I had only known, if I'd only known. But then this next line, when it was like somebody came along, it's gonna be all right. This will
Yeah.
all just blow away, the float on sort of thing.
Yeah.
And when it's faded from my mind, gone without this time, it's fading fast. It's because we are trying to use our memories to make the decision again.
Hmm.
It's almost as if we're trying to perpetuate a situation so that way we can make the right decision again.
Hmm.
And that might be the reason why we go in cycles, why the phrase you're doomed to repeat history if you don't learn from it.
Yeah,
It's
if you don't learn from it, absolutely.
Mhm.
The title, the meaning of the title is nice to meet you in
Okay.
Japanese. And so I think that sort of supports themes of new beginnings, meeting each moment as like a fresh start, a new beginning. And it kind of relates to the exercise of free will and forging new paths and kind of inherent freedom in starting anew,
Hmm.
right? So I definitely think this song is very much aligned with the notion of free will. And this song is more pro free will than
Hmm.
against it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then I had also said a song called "Glory" by
Yeah.
Umphrey's McGee, but "Glory" doesn't have lyrics. It is just an instrumental song. But I think that the fact that it's called "Glory" and the way that it sounds is inherently about determining what is glory. Like understanding what that word means in all of its context and then listening to how the song moves does, in my opinion, show how things are determined for us.
Hmm.
Because it's like a chord progression and a melody line that is almost familiar. It's
Yeah.
almost like it's not anything that's too complex. It's something that you can easily remember. It evokes this feeling. I've seen this song live several times, and I can tell you that I've been moved to tears watching it all the different times that I've seen it. Um, and and even sometimes thinking about it, I can feel my body changing. I can
Hmm.
feel that sort of chemical reaction to the idea of what glory is and how it relates to the song. So even though there's no lyrics to be able to describe it, if your audience wants to go and listen to that song and try to understand what I'm talking about when you think about the word glory and you
Hmm.
listen to this song, what that means to you is
Hmm.
determined because it's the idea of what glory is in your mind.
Yeah. Glory often connotates triumph or transcendence.
Hmm.
And you bring up an interesting point about I love songs that don't have lyrics because I feel like in some ways, so much of what we experience in life is beyond words. So
Hmm.
much of what we feel and experience, we don't necessarily have the words to convey.
Hmm.
And so for a song to be without lyrics, in some ways that's even more profound. And also it's a reminder that you have the freedom to experience the song in whatever way resonates with you.
Hmm.
Or at least that's how I feel. Like whenever I'm listening to a song that doesn't have lyrics, because lyrics will often sort of tell you what the song is about, or sort of
Yeah.
tell you how you should. It gives you more direction as far as like, this is what we intend, this is how you should feel, this is how. But when you're just listening to frequency by itself, it's beyond words. And that I almost feel on a deeper level at
Right.
times. Because,
Hmm.
emotions carry vibration and words attached to emotions carry vibration. But by vibration without words, in some ways can be even more emotionally impactful.
Hmm.
Um,
I
so
think it taps into that side of us that can't put it into words, but can only express what it is through our feelings,
mhm.
which is a lot of time for me. Like once again, I cry a lot. Like if
Mhm.
I'm listening to a good song in the car, I have tears rolling down my face, kind of thing. One particular example that I could think of is Tyler Childers' "Feathered Indians" song. I listened to that song in between two gigs, and it was a perfect time for me to hear it. But I listened to that song like 7 or 8 times in a row, so that way I could get through singing it and not crying. So that way when I got to the next gig, I was like, I'm gonna play this song and I'm gonna push through. But there are still days where I'll like listen to that song and it'll take me back to that moment where I spent the time getting emotionally attached to it on on every level that I possibly could and embracing the emotional charge that was going through me in my own, like nobody else saw it. I was in my car. So
Yeah.
nobody else saw me crying, but I'm man enough to admit that I'm a crier.
Let me ask you this. So, whenever you are listening to a song and you feel like these tears welling up, do you feel like you have the free choice to cry, or do you feel like it's an uncontrollable thing that you don't have the free will? Like, are you choosing to cry, or is it something you can't help?
I cannot help it. This
Okay.
is the reason why I put it that way, is because I think that I'm connecting to whatever it is on such a deep level that if I don't allow myself to do that, then it's going to hurt. It hurts.
The hold it in.
It's like I'm
Yes.
holding it back. You can see it in my face. I get red,
Hmm.
like it's a whole thing. I do it while I'm writing songs. If
Yeah.
I say a lyric or hum a melody line that all of a sudden I'm just like, wow, that was really good. Or I was like, man, I really like the way that sounds. If I write the lyrics out in an emotional place or based off of maybe some sort of personal experience, or maybe it's just a concept that I feel good about, I will cry. And I
Hmm.
have to. I choke up, I can't get through it. It's just like I have to start over and over and over again and just try to make it so that way that feeling isn't so prevalent in the moment.
Let me ask you this. So, as a writer, when you're writing a song, I'm sure people often ask things like, so where did you get the inspiration? And oftentimes like for instance, if someone asked me, how did you get the inspiration to write this script? I'll say things like, oh, well, I heard of this experience or I had this experience and I'm pulling from my real life experience. But sometimes it feels like I don't know if you feel this way, but do you ever feel like the inspiration for like a song lyric or the inspiration for composing music, do you feel like you're tapping into something that you can't control? Or like sometimes I feel like I'm almost channeling something, like I can't even control it.
There are two aspects of it for me.
Yeah.
There is the spontaneous creative burst, and whenever I have one of those, I have the mechanisms in place to be able to capture that moment when I need to.
Hmm.
I make it very easy to tap a button and record. But there are days where I have to force myself and just pick the guitar up and strum it and try the things that I play all the time and go through those mental gymnastics of being like, no, just persevere, just push through, give it another 10 minutes, set a timer, do all those things that will keep me trying,
Yeah.
keep just trying to pull because there is something out there. There is something that you could grab. You just have to give your brain the command to do it, or give your brain the opportunity to fall into that place. Because once again, it happens in two different areas. It happens spontaneously, but as a job, as something consistent, that is something. What it was what I was telling you before. It's about consistency, not perfection.
Yeah. So do you feel like you're exercising free will when you're writing music? Do you feel like that's an exercise of free will, or do you feel like it's divine inspiration, or do you feel like it's something that you don't have total control over?
If I could hear the songs in my head and not know how to play instruments and sing, then I would say it's determined.
Yeah.
And then of course, because I do know how to play. Or no,
Hmm.
that would be the determined part. As long as well as knowing how to play music and then doing it. The free will part comes from what I choose to write about, the concepts that I choose to record, parts that I choose to record, emotion that I choose to convey. All of those things are the free will. They do become determined because I will start to solidify the idea, but ultimately, what starts out as one thing could, not always does, but could turn into something completely different.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I'm getting closer to understanding how you think about free will versus determinism. So this is really fun. Um, can we talk about one more song that I really
Absolutely. Yeah.
like?
Which one?
It's Free by Fish.
Oh, yeah.
You can
Absolutely.
sing it if you want to.
Where's my guitar? It's sitting right over here.
You didn't know I was going to put you on the spot. Perform.
That's fine. That's fine. But once again, maybe another one. I am in the process of setting up my home studio, so
Oh,
I do
cool.
believe that. Yeah, I would love to be able to do this on my page one time. We could have this conversation on my page. I'd love to have
Yeah.
you as a guest on
Yeah.
my channel, and we'll just do it live. We'll just talk about, I'll keep everybody at bay. Don't worry. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about these lyrics. The first one, there is something I do have to preface about Fish's lyrics. There is there is a writing concept that was really influential to Trey, the lead singer of Fish.
Hmm.
He was a big fan of a gentleman named David Byrne. David Byrne is the lead singer of the Talking Heads, right? And the way that David Byrne wrote lyrics was he wrote them based off of the emotional response that you get when saying certain vowel sounds or consonant sounds. And so he would write his lyrics based off of those kind of concepts. Especially in like the era that Trey was like developing his writing style. He was like, "Oh no, I took a lot of influence from the fact that David Byrne just wrote about random weird shit, all the time, or just put the weirdest words together, but they somehow seem to fit." So, in the case of these lyrics, I'm floating in the blip a lot. I feel the feeling I forgot. Swimming weightless in the womb, bouncing gently round the room. In a minute, I'll be free and we'll be splashing in the sea. That conveys to me the determinism of it all because you are born in this place. Every every experience that you have where you're going to grow starts out this way, where you kind of have an aimlessness, but you start to recognize ways to go, things that will help maybe get you along. And then all of a sudden, now you just feel like you're just because you recognize these paths, you're just bouncing from thing to thing. You're trying this, trying that, trying this, trying that because you don't know. And then all of a sudden, when you find the thing that you like, that's when the freedom comes. And for me, when it comes down to writing the music, it means that like once I have the song out there, that lives. It's a living and breathing thing that I created in that moment. There's nobody else has created something like this. And that is a freedom. That is definitely a part of what's being free. And I think that I can relate it to that message. It could be with anything. It could be with just like your health or maybe any sort of like financial endeavor.
Mhm.
Um, and then the second line is I feel no curiosity. I see the path ahead of me. In a minute, I'll be free and we'll be splashing in the sea. We'll hear a tiny cry as the ship goes sliding by. Free. Now, this, in my opinion, is the part of removing yourself from what seems to be a commonplace in society.
Mhm.
He is saying that now that he's reached this place, there is no curiosity because he knows what he's doing. He knows that he's pursuing this path, and he's going to be free. Him and all of his buddies are going to be having fun. We're going to be splashing in the sea, and then we're going to look out in the distance and see the people that are still struggling to
Mhm.
have it, but they're cheering you on, saying that you're free, and that he's calling back, "Yes, I'm free." That's why he's saying free twice, is because that he's screaming it to them and they're screaming it to him.
Mhm.
Um, and then it kind of goes into the last one. Just I'm floating in the blip a lot. I feel the feeling I forgot. Um, but floating in that blip again, starting over again, is part of the process. So it can be determined.
Mm.
Because the process is that you have to go through a process not knowing what that process might be, but you do have to go through one.
Cool. Very interesting. Yeah. So when I listen to this song, I sort of equate the blimp as like a symbol of freedom.
Hmm.
And when he says, I feel the feeling I forgot, I interpret that as he forgot what it felt to be free. But when he chooses something that is sort of random or chaotic or something that isn't the common choice, he's not conforming to society. He's choosing to be free of kind of societal limitations, or he's choosing to be free of self limitations we put on
Hmm.
ourselves. He's remembering that feeling of freedom that he felt when he was like an infant, because it starts out bouncing gently or weightless, swimming weightless in the womb, bouncing gently around the room. To me, he's suggesting that we are born naturally free. Like we're
Hmm.
born with all this freedom, but as a society, we create these rules which inhibits our freedom, which it feels like our freedom is inhibited by these rules that we place on society to be civilized, to get a job,
Yeah,
to
capitalism.
yeah, to live by all these rules. But when he's saying, I'm floating in the blimp, to me, that's symbolic of like he's found a way to feel that sense of freedom in his mind.
Hmm.
But this might just be me projecting my own,
I
like,
think that that's the reason that's the reason why these lyrics, a lot of the time people look at Fish lyrics and they're like, what in the fuck is he talking about? And then sometimes people look at it and say, no, I'm gonna make my own inference on it. Like what you were saying, like give the mind an opportunity to think freely about what it is that this means to them,
Yeah.
regardless of how silly it might sound,
Yeah.
poetically.
So, I'm a meditator and I teach meditation. And oftentimes when I'm practicing meditation, I practice the art of observing my thoughts without attaching to my thoughts and without identifying with my thoughts, just observing them.
Hmm.
Um, And then I feel like this greater sense of I'm not just my thoughts, I'm the awareness of my thoughts. And in that awareness, I feel free.
Hmm.
And so like the blimp to me is like symbolic of that sense of freedom that we forget when we're bogged down, conforming to society.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's great. No, that's a great way to look at that. I'm really glad that you picked this song. I'm sure that it probably screamed, "Oh man, this song's called Free." Yeah, it seems like this would be the perfect song for that. But I'm glad that we were able to kind of go down that rabbit hole with this song uh because I think that it gives credence to even something as something as like what can be considered to be silly, and a band who has made a career out of having lyrics that are like this to get overlooked
hmm
and to be something to where you almost have to know the counterculture to find and appreciate songwriting like this. With Umphrey's McGee, with Fish, I know we
hmm
did Modest Mouse to start it off with, but those bands, the reason that I am such a fan is because I had moments where I recognized that they were talking about what life is like in a lot of different ways that didn't have to do with love on the radio or I mean there are songs that are introspective that have been released throughout the years that have become popular, but as a millennial, as like an elder millennial, this was that moment, because right before this, oddly enough, right before I got into any of this stuff, I was really into Corn and Limp Bizkit and everything that had to do with aggressive nature and hard drugs and some very, let's just say, very negative outlooks on life. And it wasn't until I found bands like Fish, Umphrey's McGee, Soundtrap Sector 9. Soundtrap Sector 9 is one of my favorite bands because they are an instrumental band, and that's where I really delve into how they make music, how those concepts get brought into your mind with their just instrumental stuff.
hmm
So yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
I've
you for
had such a
doing this.
wonderful time talking to you about this. This has been great.
Yeah, me too. And I love any song that can be interpreted in like multiple ways. I think that's really great art when your art can be open to interpretation.
Hmm.
Because you could just look at these lyrics literally and argue that they're kind of silly, but if you try to think about what could they symbolize, they could symbolize all kinds of things.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, so yeah, I really enjoy kind of picking your brain about how you think about freedom and what it means to have free will and determinism and all that good stuff. This is really fun. So
Yeah. Well, have
Thank
me
you so
back.
much. Yeah, anytime.
Yeah.
Do it again. We can talk about other songs too and other philosophies.
I
So,
was gonna say, how about this? How about next month, your new topic? I'll come on and talk about that.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
sounds
we
good.
because I mean I have no problem giving you at least one day a month to sit down and talk about songwriting. I mean this is something that's I was going to be doing anyway just alone. So, this makes it a
Yeah.
lot easier for me to do with somebody to be able to bounce the ideas off of.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could find songs related to a different philosophy, but all the philosophies kind of overlap at times too. So,
That's fine. No, that's totally fine. Let them overlap. I think that
yeah.
that's the point of it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I just really appreciate you putting this whole thing on and sparking an interesting conversation online. It really is a lot of fun to do this. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for joining. And if you're listening from home, comment below. Let us know what you think about the philosophy of free will versus determinism or compatibilism. Let us know what you think about the songs that we shared. If you have any different interpretations, I'd love to hear. And in the meantime, stay curious and keep asking fun questions. All right.